Hi, welcome back to the Introduction to Python Programming. This is section 11, Packages and Imports. And in this lesson, we'll take a look at using the code of others or that others have provided to make our job easier. There are lots of packages and libraries and imports for all kinds of things in the Python environment. There's packages for working with CSV files, working with databases, working with APIs, and much more. So let's go ahead and get started. The lesson objectives for this video include understanding the following: imports, modules, and packages. And that last bullet is the commit, which is related to using the version control system to pull the resources for this lesson. And we'll use that, of course, when we get to the lab. So imports, it's an organization technique. This allows us to split code into different files and import those files when we need it. What is a module? Well, a module is just a file or Python code that we import. And we'll explain what a package is in the next slide, because there's a slight difference between the module and the package, but it's not a terrible difference for sure. So if we look at the screenshot, we can see that we have the file target details, example.animal, that's the directory layout. And the import statement, imports must occur at the top. And the Python library arrow is telling us that that is just a regular Python library. It's not an actual file that I've created that I'm importing. It's provided by the standard Python libraries. And then the file path where I import the animal class, you can see that I have to use a dot instead of forward slashes to import that structure. So I go into the example folder, .animal, and I import the animal class. All right. And then you can see that I'm just using those imports below that. All right, let's move on to the next screen. So packages, may I borrow that? We don't always have to reinvent the wheel. In fact, we should avoid reinventing the wheel whenever possible. And pip3, there are different programs you can use to manage libraries and install packages for Python. But in this course, we're going to use one of the most popular ones, and that's pip3. So pip3 with the 3 is for Python 3. If you don't use the 3 or you leave the 3 off of pip and you just put pip, you will still install a library, but it will be for Python 2. And this course is for Python 3, so you always want to make sure to use the pip3 command and not just pip. Of course, when you're on your own in your programming, you'll be sure to pay attention to that distinction as well, because the libraries for Python 2 don't always work for Python 3 code. So pip is a program that automatically installs the resource. And you'll notice that in the Windows environment, I'm running it as an administrator. This is just to make sure I avoid possible permission conflicts. And in the example or the screenshot, I'm installing the request library. I've provided the URL to that library, and it goes directly to the installation instructions as well. The request library is pretty useful for working with APIs, which we will touch on in this course as well. Now, packages part 2. When dealing with different packages, it's beyond the scope of this course to tell you how you need to use every possible package that you would come across. What ultimately you're going to have to learn to do is to read the documentation and understand the documentation or the specifics of what you need to get it done. A common approach I take is when I'm trying to do something specific, I look up that specific direction within the documentation for the action I'm trying to take. I don't try to read the entire documentation. If I had done that, I'd have to spend months on lots of different types of documentation without actually programming. A lot of times with documentation, you want to find the specific action you're trying to take and read the specific documentation related to that action. So once you install the request library, we can take this very simple action. You can see that I say r equal request, that's the reference to the request package, .get, and then that's an API, the GitHub public events API, in fact. And then I'm just printing out the results of that. So the amazing thing here is that you can see with 3 lines of code, I was able to access an API and show the data related to that API. Now, of course, the request package has saved us a significant amount of time and programming and taking care of the basic concept of getting API data for us. So we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We just want to use the request library to get API data, and then we'll make our own choices on what we do with that data. So again, previously I mentioned that modules are single Python file or code that we import? Well, packages are when you have a directory of multiple files. That becomes a package by definition because there's multiple files. And that's the difference between modules and packages. Modules is a single file, packages is multiple files. Now with that, let's jump into the lab environment, take a look at the examples, the cheat sheet, and the other resources related to this lesson. All right, here we are at the lab environment. I need to check out the right commit, which I believe is D2AD7F. I should have that up here. So git checkout D2AD7F. And there we go. We're at section 11 now. I'm going to take a quick look at the cheat sheet. Be sure to always look through the cheat sheets because sometimes there's additional information that a question might reference. Okay, and then if we take a look at the examples, let's open up the main file. And we can see that example from the slideshow. And it works as I expect, even though I'm using the animal. And you can see that I'm doing from example.animal, import animal. But it would appear that PyCharm is having an issue with the directory. But Python is not, as it's still working just fine. Now if I close this and I just look at the directory, I can see that the directory looks the way I expect it to look. All right, and let's take a quick look at our exercises, our questions. Let's open that up. So it says task 1, create a class, import that class into a main.py file to be used. This is an example of creating a local module and loading the resource for use in your main program. Okay, and then task 2, use pip3 to install the requests package. Make sure that you can import and reference the library. Why do we use pip3 and not pip? Okay. And then task 3, create a person subdirectory in your main directory. So we're going to put a person direct name directory in our main directory. Create a person class with first name and last name attribute. In another file, create an employee class with a salary and position attribute. Name each file respective to their class. For example, the person class will be in the file with the title person.py. The employee class should inherit from the person class. Import and use the employee class into the main.py file. And then it says, is this a package or a module? Okay. So a little bit complicated there. So be sure to read that through. Essentially what you're going to do is you're going to make a subdirectory with class files in it that you then import into your main.py file. So as long as you get that complete, I would consider the task complete. Okay, so take a minute, see if you can solve those 3 questions. Pause the video if you need to, because I'm going to provide the answers in 3, 2, 1. Let's get to it. All right, going to the answers. Here are the answers. Section 11, packages and imports. Task 1 answer. So we can say from person, import person as fun. So I just did that as an example to show that I could rename the person class and reference it as something else. So this is, when I say person equal to fun, quotation marks, that's actually a reference to the person class. I've just renamed it when I imported it. Okay, and then task 2. So once you install the request library, which should be very easy to do, you should just be able to open up a command prompt and type in pip3 install request. Then in a file, just say import request and then print request. And you should get some data that prints out. You shouldn't get an error. So task 3, this one was a little bit more complicated. So a subdirectory with multiple files makes this a package example. So it's not a module, it's a package. And in this screenshot, we can see what we were going for. We have a person folder, we have a person class, and an employee class. Now, the employee inherits from the person, even though we're not seeing that in the code, it does. And then from person.employee, we import employee. And employee equal employee quotation marks print employee.first name, so that we can see that that import works. Now a gotcha here that might have been a little confusing at first might be that when you did the import of the person class in the employee file, because to inherit from person in the employee file, you had to import the person class so that Python knew what that class was when you referenced it. And you would have had to use the full path even though they're in the same directory. So it would have been in the employee file, you would have put person.person import person, and then you would have had your employee class with the person in the quotation marks. So hopefully you got that done. Of course, let me know in the comments if you had any problems with that or something wasn't clear. All right, so that completes this section. Let's go ahead and jump into the slideshow and finish it out. All right, here we are. We've already gone over this slide. Let's jump to the next one, which is the conclusion. I hope you had fun in this lesson. I hope you understood what we're talking about with these imports and modules. It's definitely something it's not too bad. And once you get the hang of it, you'll have a lot of fun importing the tools that others have built that make programming different things much easier to do. For example, if we were going to program our own API interaction and not use the request library, we'd probably be busy for a couple weeks to a month. Any case, so what did we learn about in this lesson? We learned about imports, we learned about modules, we learned about packages. We also learned about building our own modules and importing that into our main files for use. So that completes this lesson. Hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you in the next. Thank you.